I've played a lot of games, and along the way I've controlled many awesome characters that drove the action and the story in some cases, but the one thing I've never considered was the gender demographic of characters that I was portraying. We don't really sit down and think, hey, what are the most influential female characters throughout gaming history? But that was the topic of a monthly Firefighter video giveaway, and the lucky winner was Jason Scott 1978, who asked for a video talking about the top 10 female characters in gaming. But we all know my rules. In order for me to make that judgment, I'd have to play every single game with a female in it, and that's not something I'll accomplish in my life. So instead, I'm going to change it to influential females in gaming. And Jason, I hope you enjoy this episode, because without your support, I probably wouldn't consider talking about it. Let's begin. Resident Evil, Steel Battalion, and Devil May Cry. 3 totally different games that you might think would never correlate with each other in any capacity. And if you've played them, you would know these games are very different. One is a survival horror game, one is a tank simulator, and the other is a hack and slash. In fact, out of all of those games I just mentioned, when it comes to Bayonetta, Devil May Cry is really the only one that might stand out in comparison, but that's just the front end. If you pulled back the curtains, you would see that the 3 games I just mentioned were produced by Shinji Mikami, Atsushi Inaba, and Hideki Kamiya, respectively. Those 3 people came together to create one half of Platinum Games by creating a company known as Seeds Inc. The other half of Platinum Games was created by Tatsuya Minami, and both of them broke away from Capcom. They were able to work with a major competitor because of this, Sega, and they created Bayonetta, which as a modern IP has done fairly well for itself. But the main character, she's a wonderful one for quite a few reasons. The big one is that she was created by women for women. The artist Mari Shimazaki took her perspective on the character to craft one based on empowerment and individuality. Bayonetta is more than what we would call a femme fatale. She's strong, witty, self-assured, and is one of the rare examples we see of a female protagonist leading an entire franchise in the action genre, something that, as you all know, has historically been dominated by male protagonists. She's a role model, the embodiment of strength, resilience, and self-expression, and her personality is perhaps one of my favorite aspects of her. She knows that she's sexy, and she uses it as a weapon, flipping the script on the ever-so-common objectification of females in gaming. She has 4 games under her belt, and fingers crossed we'll see more from her. You know, I don't want to sound shallow, but between me and you, if there was ever a character from a video game I would allow to crack my head open like a watermelon, it would be ChunLi. As far as I know, she's the first female playable character in a fighting game we could control. Again, that era associated the word action and violence to a male perspective. That's machismo 101, right? But ChunLi, from a design standpoint, be it her reflection to her Chinese heritage, her unyielding dedication to take down Shadowloo, or the fact that she could fuck you up in every comprehensible way and then giggle like a schoolgirl after, she's a badass character. You'll see quite a few different characters on this list, but not everyone is what I would call a pop culture icon. ChunLi is. Her presence in Street Fighter II set a standard. As an Asian lady, she was not submissive. She was not passive. If given the chance to play tetherball with M. Bison's nutsack, she would in a heartbeat, and she would take down anyone in her way. To me, her presence inspired other women in fighting games. For example, Cammy, Mai Shiranui, Taki, hell, even Ivy Valentine. All of these characters in some way owe their existence to ChunLi. And one other weird thing happened. Ladies love to play her in the game, so in some way, she was a major catalyst in the many females taking interest in gaming around the 80s and 90s, so props ChunLi. She's been in over 30 games, and while she might not serve as a face for Capcom, she's definitely the backbone. There's going to be a few occurrences where I mention that a character is the first of something. ChunLi was the first solid female fighter, and for the survival horror franchise, Jill Valentine was essentially the same. For anyone who hasn't played Resident Evil, Jill is a member of STARS, STARS being the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, the best of the best from Raccoon Police Department. And she was there during the mansion incident of 1998 that kickstarted the entire franchise. She was the master of unlocking, an intelligent young lady who was competent and resourceful. She would focus on surviving, and her character design was well balanced. And the mansion incident wouldn't be her last time encountering what people might consider overwhelming odds. After all, she did stand toe-to-toe with Nemesis, and her character was so damn culturally impactful that it jumped to the big screen. Jill Valentine is one of those characters who are able to showcase a full range of emotion in a video game environment. She exudes humanity. She is not invincible, and her strength provides some sense of connection with us as gamers. While some people might have a love for Ada Wong, Rebecca Chambers, or even Claire Redfield, Jill is where it's at for me. I'm not a huge fan of Final Fantasy VII at all. I don't hold any weird retro goggles for it. I didn't play it as a kid, and in my horrible opinion, I much prefer Final Fantasy IX, but to each their own. There are a few dope female characters we've seen throughout the Final Fantasy franchise, such as Aerith, Yuffie, Yuna, Terra, Rinoa, or even Rydia, but the one that stands out to me as the most important is Tifa. I've been talking about how these characters are so epic, dissecting them to the bones to describe how I feel about them, but to me, Tifa did more for culture outside of the game than any other character on this list. When people experienced Tifa, it paved the way for women all over the world to really get into cosplaying and creating fan art. She exuded sex appeal. Sorry, it's true. Since 1998, she's been mentioned in the top 10 lists of sexy women, and guess what? Men and women alike love feeling attractive, and Tifa was a catalyst for that. In terms of writing though, she's a very layered character, and that's something I can give props to Yoshinori Kitase and Kazushige Nojima for. As a supporting character in the game, I felt that she was more interesting than the emo fanboy Cloud. In some ways, I felt Cloud's bullshit was being forced into our face, whereas every single time Tifa was around, it was much more interesting. Her relationship with Cloud to me is a cornerstone of what makes the story of Final Fantasy VII work, right? Tifa is more than just a love interest, she's a person who exudes so much empathy. She understands Cloud, she does not judge him. She carries him through what many people would call emotional trauma because that's what it is. She's strong, she's beautiful, and in other JRPGs, females tended to be the magic users. Not in this case. She would kick your ass with her fists. That's true strength. I'll be honest with you, I have never played a single Horizon game. That era of gaming is one that evades me because by the time this game came out, I was already dedicated to my retro gaming journey. But I have seen many people play this, and Aloy as a character, she intrigues me. She's fucking incredible when it comes to being self-sufficient, she's a hunter, she's witty, and constantly aware of what's going on around her. As always, her existence challenges the traditional narrative of machismo. In fact, she has nothing to prove to anyone, not that she would care. She was an outcast from the beginning. She was used to being treated as less than human, and despite that, she challenged every norm that was placed on her by her tribe. As a woman, which in the end culminates to this powerhouse character that is a symbol of resistance, defiance, and empowerment. I feel in some ways, the more modern the character, the more writers cared about finally crafting that connection between the playable character and the player, because more often than not, it was just press start kick ass, right? I can count on 10 fingers and toes how many characters existed just to exist. But Aloy is different. The game strives on diving deep into who she is, and Aloy herself is on a self-discovery journey as well, and that, to me, is a genuine connection. Aloy is a badass. Well, the ladies loved her because she was independent and strong. The guys loved her because boobies! It's true. The pyramid boobies we saw in 1996 were ravaging the male hormonal system from Anchorage, Alaska, all the way to Poland. And between me and you, Lara is the only reason why the game stands out, because I can't fucking stand Tomb Raider. Right now, I don't like the franchise. Maybe I will in the future, but as it stands right now, it can kick rocks. But Lara as a character, she's badass, she's cunning, athletic, resourceful, and she isn't afraid to stick it to the man. In fact, if there was ever a character on this list that might be a feminist icon, I think it would be her. As we get further and further up this list, I feel more and more people will recognize the characters, and in the case of Lara, if you put her next to a gallery of other female characters in video gaming and ask someone to pick which one do you recognize, I'd venture to say that most of the time her picture would get picked. Her presence in pop culture aligned with what we saw with comic book characters, and of course the movies boosted that as well. I can't say much about the newer iterations of Tomb Raider, but I'm sure she's seen growth as a character throughout the years. What do you think? Feel free to let us know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's 1987 and the NES is in full swing. Games like Castlevania, Russian Attack, The Legend of Kage, Solomon's Key, Section Z, and even The Goonies 2 are kicking ass. So many companies are moving forward, creating their franchises and marching into unknown territory to make a name for themselves. One game that would stand out would be Metroid, an action-adventure game jointly developed by Intelligent Studios and Nintendo R&D 1. So you bought the game, you got home, and if you were like me, you read the manual. Granted, I wasn't alive then, but I like to think as kids, we loved taking in the lore. After all, this was the era where manuals actually were manuals. If you paid attention, you learned that the Federation police have decided to send a space hunter to penetrate a certain fortress and to take out the big bad evil bitch, Mother Brain. We're told of Samus Aran and how he is the greatest of all space hunters. You would put time into beating the game only to see in the very end, Samus remove his helmet and whoa! It was a lady the whole time. That surprise is probably one of the greatest endings, not only on the NES, but realistically in the pop culture world. It would make M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong have an erection that rivaled time and space. In some ways, it felt like a massive middle finger to the male standard of action games. I appreciate her for her autonomy though. She's the one person consistently capable of getting the job done, and we don't need to know about her love life. She isn't there to be an object of your attention, she's there to fuck stuff up. We do have some insight into who she is and her backstory, but I don't want to spoil that in case others want to check out future Metroid games. But I have nothing but mad respect for Samus. She's stoic and powerful, and I love that. I know I talk about a lot on this channel. I know I share so many of my own personal stories. Many of them revolve around mental health because that's important to me. When push comes to shove, everything that we are stems from what we think. It's so easy to put on blinders and pretend that we live in this happy world where nothing can affect us. But in reality, we've become so accustomed to the bullshit that we're blunted against it. When I was in the 5th grade, I watched the towers fall. It wasn't soon after that I was woken up early to hopefully see a space shuttle re-enter, only to watch it disintegrate before my eyes. Life wasn't easy. I focused on the wrong things fairly consistently. I was contending with depression and mental health issues, and what I did to cope with it was join the military, to die. Because at that point there was nothing anyone could say or do to me that I hadn't already said or done 6 inches from the mirror. My choice to tackle my mental health played a huge role in who I am today, and who I want to be tomorrow. That's why Ellie from The Last of Us is so high on this list. Out of all of the games throughout history, none of them have had such a breakout character that focused on mental health. We see her journey, the losses, the moral challenges she has to address in a world that simply stopped being a world. Her emotional background showed me that writers are capable of creating non-obtuse characters. They just choose to. And to me, The Last of Us is one of those games that are an experience, not a game, a genuine experience, much like Final Fantasy VI to many of us. All Ellie's ever known since she was old enough to be cognizant of her surroundings was military bullshit. She has only known suffering, and while we're at it, she's an icon for the LGBTQIA+ community. Perhaps one of the most well-known damsels in distress to ever exist in the history of video gaming, Princess Peach personifies the storytelling standards of Nintendo at the time. But one thing I love about Princess Peach, or Princess Toadstool, whatever you prefer to call her, she's been so dynamic through the years. In the early years of Mario, she was always a supporting character, that ultimate end goal, rescue the princess. But throughout the years, she's moved from the background to the foreground. She's very much an active participant in the Mario universe. From a design perspective, she is exceptionally feminine, brilliant blue eyes, stunning blonde hair, and a flowing pink dress. For many female gamers, she was the portal to the video gaming world. She's kind, she's optimistic, almost to a flaw, and given the amount of time she's been kidnapped, she's probably one of the most resilient characters out there. Because she's been around for so long, she's one of 2 female characters to me that have what I call generational relevance. Grandmothers, mothers, daughters, and granddaughters know Princess Peach. She's been there for many of us since day one, especially if we owned a Nintendo console. For me, the first time I saw her was in the opening scenes of Super Mario 64, but for others, it meant beating Mario 1 or 3, or maybe even playing as her in Super Mario 2. I love Princess Peach, even my wife loves her, it's her favorite Smash character to choose. Much like Princess Peach, there is another princess that has the luxury of being known as a generational character, Princess Zelda. To me, Princess Zelda and Princess Peach are almost interchangeable when it comes to their significance in gaming history, and equally interchangeable if we talk about how Nintendo transferred them from being a damsel in distress to a powerhouse character. But in my opinion, Zelda did it first. We've seen Zelda take so many different forms that paralleled the main action. Not only was she a princess, but she was also chic. Not only was she a princess, she was also Tetra. She was capable and just as responsible as Link in molding the narrative of the Legend of Zelda series. I find her to be elegant and confident, someone who exudes emotional intelligence. In more modern games, at least the ones that we can take seriously, she isn't afraid to let her humanity creep out every now and then, even though she's a princess. To many female gamers, she was an agent of change and in some weird way, a role model. Someone who consistently sacrifices their own freedom to protect the people that she presides over. If there was ever a female protagonist in a game that I would actually look up to, it would be her, hands down. And that's it for today's episode. I know that there was a lot of word vomit, but I tried my best to kind of capture what these cherished characters stood for and how important they were to the overall scope of video gaming history. What female characters, in your opinion, are the most important? I'd love to know down below in the comments, and I know the community would as well. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home in our community. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love remembering a time when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to join us. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly impacts the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.